We have all learnt about chemical reactions and their different types. Have you ever thought that there are chemical reactions taking place inside a living organism also? What do we require the most in a chemical reaction? Yes, some raw materials. The raw materials react in a chemical reaction to give us the product. In this video session, we will learn all about the chemical processes called glycolysis and fermentation. Can you guess what the term glycolysis means? Glycolysis is a Greek term where glycos means sugar and lysis means breakage. Therefore, glycolysis means breakage of sugar. Gustav M. Dem, Otto Meyerhoff and J. Parnas gave the scheme of glycolysis. Hence, this pathway is known as EMP pathway. Where and in which organism does this pathway take place? Any guesses? The pathway takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. It occurs in all living organisms, irrespective of aerobic and anaerobic respiratory pathway. What happens during glycolysis? During glycolysis, the glucose from the digestive food gets converted into pyruvic acid. In animals, the main source of glucose is starch. But what is the main source of glucose in plants? It is sucrose. Sucrose is a disaccharide and is broken down into glucose and fructose by the enzyme invertase. The glucose and fructose formed will undergo glycolysis. Glycolysis is an enzymatic pathway and it takes place in various steps. The whole pathway is divided into two phases, the preparatory phase and the payoff phase. Let's go through the steps one by one. In the very first step, the glucose in the cell is converted into glucose 6-phosphate by the enzyme hexokinase. It is then isomerized to form fructose 6-phosphate. So, in which step do you think fructose has to start with if it is the raw material for glycolysis? Yes, fructose start with the step fructose 6-phosphate. ATP here provides the required phosphate. Fructose 6-phosphate is then converted into fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. In this step, there is the utilization of ATP. Can you now say how many ATPs are used in total? 2 ATP molecules are utilized to convert glucose or fructose into fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Now, fructose 1,6-bisphosphate splits into two 3-carbon compounds, dihydroxyacetone phosphate and glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. The dihydroxyacetone phosphate gets converted into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate to undergo the further process of glycolysis. By this step, the preparatory phase ends and the payoff phase starts. So what happens to the two molecules of 3-carbon compounds? The PGL is converted into 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Here, NADH is formed from NAD. From where does the phosphate in this step come? Here, the phosphate is obtained from an inorganic phosphate and not from the ATP. 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is converted into 3-phosphoglyceric acid. Here, 2 two phosphate molecules are released and are used to convert two molecules of ADP into two molecules of ATP. Now, the phosphate position changes from the third carbon in phosphoglyceric acid to second carbon in phosphoglyceric acid. There is no utilization of ATP in this step. In the second last step, the 2-phosphoglyceric acid is converted into phosphoenol pyruvate. Phosphoenol pyruvate loses its phosphate group to form into pyruvate. Hence, this step leads to the formation of two ATP molecules. Can you now guess why the first 5 phase is called preparatory and the other 5 as payoff? Yes, the first 5 steps require energy and utilize ATP molecules, whereas the next steps helps in the formation of ATP molecules. Hence, glycolysis is a 10-step process. 4 ATP molecules are directly released and 2 ATP molecules get used up during this process. What happens to the 2 pyruvate molecules formed in this process? Pyruvic acid can be utilized in 3 ways: lactic acid formation, alcohol formation, and in aerobic respiration. Let's now discuss the fate of pyruvate during lactic acid formation and alcohol fermentation. Do you know what is meant by fermentation? It is an aerobic process in which sugar is converted into alcohol or lactic acid. Can you guess which organism comes to your mind when we speak about alcoholic fermentation? Yes, it is the yeast. Yeast undergo anaerobic conversion of pyruvate into ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. Can you name the enzyme required during this process? The enzyme involved here is pyruvic acid decarboxylase and alcohol dehydrogenase. What do you think? Does the pyruvate break down completely in this process? No, the pyruvate is partially broken down. Where does lactic acid fermentation takes place? This type of fermentation is seen in some bacteria and in muscle cells during anaerobic respiration. Here, the pyruvate is broken down to form lactic acid. Is this a complete digestion or partial digestion of pyruvate? It is a partial digestion of pyruvate. We have already discussed only partial digestion of glucose takes place during glycolysis and fermentation. The amount of energy released is also very less. Can you guess what percentage of energy in glucose is released during lactic acid or alcoholic fermentation? Yes, it's only 7% and the energy released is not trapped in ATP. Both the process produce acid or alcohol, hence they are hazardous. If so, do you think that yeast can survive during alcoholic fermentation as the concentration of alcohol goes high? Exactly. They cannot survive if the concentration of alcohol goes beyond 13%. Now, can you say what will be the maximum percentage of alcohol in alcoholic drinks? Let's summarize what we have learned.
Manorama Horizon. Learning made simple.